Thank you all for being here again. It means the world to us to be with you in virtual community. This is my sermon for the year, for this day. Who are the people you will remember on this Yom Kippur? And what does who you remember say about who you are and who you aspire to be? I find myself and many in our community coming into Yom Kippur feeling a heavy grief and helplessness. A grief and helplessness like that has been felt by Jewish communities for so many centuries. After all, there has not been a shortage of horror throughout Jewish history. Jerusalem was sacked and destroyed 2,000 years ago. Pogroms have devastated communities for so many centuries. 6 million perished in the Holocaust. Some of this horror is recounted in our Yom Kippur liturgy. There is a section in our prayers called Martyrology, or Ella Azkara. These people will I remember. It recounts the 10 rabbinic sages executed during the time of the persecution of the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century of the Common Era, in heartbreaking and gruesome detail. Although we don't usually include this section in the Reformed services, I will include part of it in this sermon today. And I'd like to ask, what does our remembering these rabbinic sages say about who we are and who we aspire to be? Here are 2 examples of the story shared about our beloved rabbinic martyrs. There is Rabbi Akiva, who publicly disobeyed Roman law against Torah study. The Romans arrested him and tortured him by flaying his skin with iron combs. His students watched in horror as their beloved teacher was brutally tortured. Rabbi Akiva remarked to his students that he was grateful to have had the opportunity to love God with all of his soul, as we read just a little while ago, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha, b'chol nafshecha. For the first time, in other words, to love God so much that he'd be able to give God his soul. The story then goes on that Rabbi Akiva, in continued defiance of the Roman law, recited the Shema at the end of his torture. And when he had finished saying the words, Adonai Echad, he passed away. There is Rabbi Hananiah ben Tradion, who was caught teaching Torah in public. He was arrested by the Romans, who wrapped him in a Torah scroll, put water-soaked fabric on him to prolong his pain, and then set the scroll on fire. Rabbi Hananiah's students felt hopeless watching the slow and painful death of their beloved teacher. But even as he was being tortured, Rabbi Hananiah inspired them, saying, the parchment is burning, but the letters are flying off. In other words, that they would never succeed at destroying our Jewish heritage. The Roman guard was so moved by the great rabbi's piousness that he removed the wet fabric to hasten Rabbi Hananiah's death and end his suffering. These people do I remember. Both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Hananiah were persecuted for the crime of teaching Torah and being Jewish. They refused defiantly to stop teaching Torah no matter what the punishment would be. What are the values here in this narrative? These rabbinic heroes would not let religious persecution stop them from practicing their religion proudly. What does it matter for us? Over so many generations, Jews could look at these role models and get the courage to practice Judaism too, despite continued religious persecution and danger. Not only did Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Hananiah not lose their resolve in their final moments of torture, they seemed instead to have epiphanies and to continue to teach Torah, even when in excruciating pain and on the verge of death. What are the values here about that? That they were unwavering in their commitment to teach Torah, even through extreme pain and distress. Their courage and resolve remains inspiring to this day. What does it matter, again, for us? Even in the worst of times, there are still valuable lessons to learn. We have ultimate control over our responses and behavior. As Rhea shared so beautifully earlier, we can choose how we respond. Not to react, but choose how to respond, even when we're facing trauma and despair. These values do I remember. The people who we remember today also epitomize values that we choose to remember and live our lives by. This has become an important and controversial topic in America and at Princeton today. We have seen in the last several months the statues of Confederate heroes coming down as those people epitomized the not so positive values of slavery and racism. We saw in June when President Eisgruber and the Princeton Board of Trustees chose to remove Woodrow Wilson's name from the School of Public Policy and the residential college. In his letter to the community, President Eisgruber explained the decision as follows. Wilson's segregationist policies make him an especially inappropriate namesake for a public policy school. When a university names a school of public policy or for a political leader, it inevitably suggests that the honoree is a model for students who study at the school. This searing moment in American history has made clear that Wilson's racism disqualifies him from that role. In a nation that continues to struggle with racism, this university and its School of Public and International Affairs must stand clearly and firmly for equality and justice. Sometimes when we think about those people who we remember, we ought also to think about those people who we do not, on principle, remember too, like those Confederate leaders or Woodrow Wilson. We ask about everyone. What is the legacy they have left us? What are the values that the lives they lived epitomize? Can we be proud of and inspired by those values? Let me pause for a moment and ask you that question, not rhetorically, but now actually. Who are the people you will remember? And what are the values that you associate with them? They can be beloved family and friends. They can be public figures. They can be role models who were known by you, but not by many others. Who are they? And what values did they exemplify? I'll share some of the people who I am remembering today and at this moment. Some people remain in mind for a long time, and some people are top of mind now because of recent events or circumstances. We all have permission for this list to change as our own needs and circumstances change. I will remember Breonna Taylor. There is moral outrage that this 26-year-old Black woman with her entire life ahead of her was killed by white male police officers in the middle of the night in her own home. Last week, 2 of the 3 police officers who discharged their weapons that night, indeed the ones who fired the bullets that killed Breonna Taylor, were not indicted for any wrongdoing. Only one of the 3 police officers was indicted, and that was for a more minor felony charge and not murder. Why do I remember Breonna Taylor? Because she has become a symbol in this country, similar to George Floyd, Eric Garner, and others, of systemic racism and the lack of justice and accountability. New York Times reporter Ruchmini Calamachi, while talking to Michael Barbaro in the New York Times podcast, The Daily, shared the following observation. Breonna Taylor's name, her as a byword for racial injustice, has spread from coast to coast. She's become bigger than the facts of her case. She's become a symbol of young Black women killed in a cruel and awful way by a group of white cops. So we say her name to remember the tragic loss of life and to remember the systemic racism injustice that caused her death. She too was a martyr. This person will I remember. I will remember Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away 10 days ago as we had just begun to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We have been hearing about RBG's legacy so much and from so many people paying such moving and beautiful tributes to her. Linda Greenhouse wrote in her article, How Did a Young Unknown Lawyer Change the World, in the New York Times, the following, quote, she had a project, a goal from which she never deviated during her long career. It was to have not only the Constitution, but also society itself understand men and women as equal. She envisioned a world different from the one she had grown up in, a better world in which gender was no obstacle to women's achievement, to their ability to dream big and to realize their aspirations. Then she set out to use the law to usher in that world into existence. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg also became more than even all the numerous things she accomplished and achieved. She was our notorious RBG. She was one of those public figures who reassured us that there are still leaders with moral courage who we can look up to and admire. Her extraordinary relationship with Justice Scalia, despite their stark ideological difference, was a model for how perhaps other leaders with diametrically opposed views can still respect one another and be dear friends. RBG gave us hope that all will be okay in the world. This person will I remember. She epitomized intellectual honesty, feminism, respect, and friendship that transcended ideology and politics, hope, justice, and so much more. These values will I remember. I will remember Lonnie Dunn. He was my beloved uncle who passed away in March. You haven't heard of him. He wasn't famous. but he was one of the people closest to me in my life and gave to me more than I could ever give back to him. He was the epitome of a sharp and discerning mind, a successful self-made person, someone devoted to family, a patron of the arts and Broadway, someone who cared deeply about the top 5 guitarist lists and would debate anyone who disagreed, a Yankees fan, someone who cared about doing the right thing and who would fight against injustice. This person will I remember. These people on our list do not need to be famous. We cannot all be RBG as much as we might try, but we can be influential to those in our lives and in our worlds. Indeed, those who weren't famous but who were our closest family and friends are often even more influential to us. We knew them, we were emotionally invested in them, we miss them, and we are inspired by their legacy, and we desire to incorporate some part of their legacy into our own. My inspiration to become a rabbi and to do the work that I do did not primarily come from famous people, although I was certainly influenced by some of them. No, my inspiration to do the work that I do came mostly from my family, many of whom who are still alive and even with us this morning, and others who have passed on but who impacted me during our time together with the legacy they have left. Who are the people you will remember? In many ways, we play out our own deaths on Yom Kippur. We do not eat or drink. We wear white garments like those we will one day, please God, a long time from now, be buried in. But perhaps the most important way we will play out our own deaths today is that we consider and examine the legacy that we will one day leave. It is just Jewish custom to say, may their memory be a blessing when someone passes away. To me, this means may the memory of them inspire others to live better lives and be better people because of them. May the legacy they leave us stay with us for generations to come, guide us through life's obstacles and dilemmas, and be in our hearts as we choose how we will build our own legacy. Because at some point, the question changes from who are the people you will remember to who are the people who will remember you? And how will they remember you? What do you epitomize? What are the values you exemplify? What are the goals and dreams that you are working so hard to achieve that will improve our world and the lives of those around us? At Yom Kippur services many years from now, the stories of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Hanania will still be read, and Jewish communities will consider their courage and resolve in the face of oppression and cruelty. What other legacies will these communities and people in the future consider? Whose stories will they be telling? Today we have remembered Breonna Taylor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Lonnie Dunn, and everyone who is in your hearts right now and on this day. Their legacies have impacted us. They have informed the legacies that we ourselves will one day leave behind. Who will remember your legacy one day? At Yom Kippur services long in the future, when the rabbi gets up and delivers a Yom Kippur sermon and asks, who are the people you will remember again, as I have today? Who will have your name in their hearts? And when asked what you epitomized, what you stood for, and what you gave to make the lives of others better, what would you like for them to say? These people will I remember. Gemar Chatima Tova, may you be written and sealed in the book of life.